I request the panelists for the first session to please assemble on the stage. Yes. The first session, State of Agriculture in the BIMSTEC region, Opportunities for Growth. This session will be chaired by Dr. Smita Sirohi, Principal Scientist, ICAR India. The speakers of this session are Dr. Kalpana Sastry, Dr. Biswas Gauchan, Dr. Devesh Roy, Dr. Manoj, and Professor S.K. Mohanty. I request all of them to please come up on the stage so that we can begin the session. Before we begin, a brief introduction to our chair. Dr. Smita Sirohi, Principal Scientist, ICAR. She has, in the previous stints, carried out responsibilities as Joint Secretary G20 for the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, Government of India. Prior to this, she served as Advisor, Agriculture and Marine Products to the Government of India, based at the Embassy of India for Belgium, Luxembourg, and the European Union in Brussels. She also served as Head of Department, Dairy Economics, Statistics and Management at the National Dairy Research Institute in Karnal. Dr. Sirohi has been a member of several policy-making and expert committees of national importance in the field of agriculture and dairy. She has, to her credit, over 100 publications in various research journals, books, several contributions in policy documents, book chapters, articles, and review papers. I welcome you, ma'am, and I request you to commence the session. Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you. And welcome to this first session, a very important session. The stage has been set in the morning in the inaugural session. And now we have an absolutely distinguished panel of 5 speakers. And since this is the first session, the onus lies on us that we keep the program to the time limit. So we have 10 to 11:30 is our time. We have 90 minutes. And these 90 minutes with 5 speakers, what we will do is we'll give 15 minutes to each speaker. Is it good enough for all? And so that, and then another 15 minutes, last 15 minutes for the question and answer session. I don't want to repeat things which have already been said in the morning, how important agriculture is for us, and also reference has been made to the action plan, BIMSTEC action plan on agricultural cooperation. So what we would like to see is that what is the kind of evidence which flows from the different countries and how that evidence can fit in into making this action plan a real action plan rather than being just on the paper. So my first speaker today is Professor Kalpana Sastry. I'll briefly introduce my speaker to you. Dr. Kalpana Sastry, she is currently serving as Managing Director of AG Hub Foundation as Professor Jai Shankar Telangana State Agriculture University, Hyderabad. This is a very important organization which is looking after the agri startups, and this is the incubation unit for agri startups, and she's doing a great job there. We have been interacting with her during our G20 days also. She is a distinguished agricultural scientist with 3 decades of experience in the areas of agricultural research, technology, commercialization, intellectual property and innovation management, entrepreneurship, and startup ecosystem development. She joined ARS service in 1984. She's our senior in ARS, and she has long stint in National Academy of Agricultural Research Management, where she worked in various capacities. She also earlier worked at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So, madam, floor is all yours.
Sorry. A very good morning to all of you. And at the outset, my sincere thanks to Dr. Sachin and Dr. Mahapatra and the team at RIS for inviting me. of course, it was great to even catch up with Dr. Suresh Babu and his team at IFPRI. During my last few years of my stint at NAM, we had a fantastic collaboration even on the ASTI project, which I was leading for India with IFPRI, and we could do a lot of work on it. But primarily, before I even move on to start my lecture, I must say I'm probably a misfit. I'm not an economist, and I'm surrounded by several people engaged in numbers, trade, and economics. Having said that, I just come to this table with a different opinion, which I would like to put in the current state of agriculture today. So coming back to this, I think all of us are in a region where definitely the Green Revolution played a role and positioned India as a food producer at the global level, and that's significant. Along with this development, all the other countries, including the BIMSTEC members, have been, very vibrantly contributing to what we are talking about agriculture today. But as was voiced in the previous session, agriculture tomorrow is definitely on the change. And I think that's where we are trying to build. And through this session, I would like to just put up at the end about 2 or 3 takeaways which the organizers can take it forward and consider as developing as they move on to the second phase of this project in the BIMSTEC countries. What is so common about all of us? All the economies in this region are agrarian in nature. All of them survive on, dividends put into agriculture and the returns which come through agriculture practices. All of them continue to be on sustenance type of farming measures, but the new added dimensions which I would like everyone to even think is agriculture is now a business. It's something new for many of us who have been trained in agriculture. And somewhere down the line, if we want to make, like our Prime Minister reiterates that we want to have a, $3 million and position the country at the global area. Agriculture has significant role to play. Now, how do we do that? I think, and when we went outside for the photograph also, all of us, at least I was definitely, thinking, what is this Delhi? It's really warm. So what we used to talk 5 to 10 years back, that there is something like climate change is something we are feeling. So the first and foremost, we'll have to turn agriculture into climate resilient mode. And for that, yes, all the 7 countries have a strong R&D, either the NARS, the National Agriculture Research System, which has evolved in India since the independence. The same model is in Thailand, the same model is in Bangladesh, the same model operates in Nepal and all the other countries, even in Sri Lanka. Fortunate I have had umpteen occasions of interacting with the scientists and the R&D personnel and policy from all these countries when I was working in NAM. And we have a common agenda, yes. So how do we reshape the National Agriculture Research System into, I would call it as National Agriculture, agribusiness system too. This has to go in synergy, not that you lead research. So I was mentioning the heat which we felt. If you read about 2 days back, India is definitely a recognized wheat producer. But my fear is, because of the climate change, and if we do not have heat-resistant new varieties coming in, and already there are predictions about 3 to 4 drop in the wheat, production, which might impact the export and trade, because we do position ourselves as a very important wheat producer country at the global market. Now that's going to impact. So the answer has to come from the R&D system. Fine, you do innovations, you have a lot and already my colleagues in the wheat research station are working on it. That's absolutely fine. But I think the biggest challenge, and I was actually talking to Dr. Smita also, and a little worry from an old person like me, is the connectivity between the research system to taking these products into the markets. There is definitely a little bit of challenge area in the thinking, in the attitude of the research and R&D professionals, in the people to assimilate and take these to the markets. Yes, you need a little bit more of sensitization that there are products available. In this journey, I think, and we all acknowledge, in all these 7 countries, I've had in the last 2 years a lot of opportunities to interact with entrepreneurs from Nepal, from Bhutan, Sri Lanka. We've had lots of them coming and walking into our innovation hub, or actually going and talking to them. So there is definitely an environment and an ecosystem which needs to be built into these innovations to be taken, and that disconnect which I was voicing between the R&D and the commercialization activity in agriculture can be definitely reduced. I think the star players in this would be the startups. At Ag Hub, where we started only 2 years back, we have 100-odd startups. And 90% of them come from the background and beautiful solutions, especially in these areas of climate resilience or green economy, things like that. They come up, but they're all with the background of not agriculture, non-agriculture, tech guys walking from the IT sector into agriculture. It's very interesting, but their seemingly knowledge has to be deployed in agricultural farm situation. The rapport building with the farmers or the FPOs, there's our challenges. So they are not able to go out. And if they can't do it at the local level, how can we expect trade between these at the regional and global level to take up with these people? So I think the onus on such sort of platforms would also be to how to build an ecosystem of strengthening partnerships and trying to build a system where these startup innovations can be taken as products into the market. And that's, I think, my second takeaway. One, R&D to look at the new gaps and the new type of problems facing, yes, which they continue to do. But then trying to say that everything cannot be done by the NARS, recognizing and enveloping new partners into this, the definition of, the traditional definition which we all follow from IFPRI of the National Agriculture Research System needs to be expanded to other players too. Third, and I think we in tune with what we voiced during our G20 presidency and the final document, and as we march towards Brazil, and I think this region, all the countries at par have this as a strength, that natural native foods and the traditional foods on which we are resting, the norms, the cultural attitudes, the way we live have actually stemmed up from them. Here is an opportunity for us to take these in and develop them into globally recognized, globally acceptable products. It's an opportunity, but there's a lot to do. I was in Bhutan the other 2 months back, and I was charmed by the red quinoa, which is grown, which came in 2015. But today it is an aspirant for a GI, the geographical indication, because in the environment it is growing in the sub-Himalayan region. The productivity, the type of antioxidant in form of the redness of the product is fantastic. It shapes well for the health from the as a wellness product. Is it not time for us to recognize these efforts of the local producers in a small country like Bhutan and take it into the international markets through research interventions of better product development, better packaging, without any compromise on the returns which go to the FPOs or the growers themselves? I think this is one area I would like to reiterate again. If we have Sri Anna mission of the Government of India in place today, it's not just trying to say grow millets, but have a type of advantage built into in this region, that the products which come from the native foods or food products or agriculture crops, the returns go to the growers. We have a good supply chain built up at local, hyperlocal, local, regional level. Then position them at the global level. Though we would be answering many of the questions of SDG goals which we have to really answer. And then give them a new, so what does all this lead? We are also going to build a new group of agri-professionals who can be part of the international trade, but also keep the local type of practices, farm practices in. The last part, I would say, today in agriculture, definitely green technologies are voiced. Right here in our innovation hub, we had a Cisco, ex-Cisco 2 group partners coming to us with a patented technology of a solar type, panel. Then we worked with them, and today they have a beautiful working model of agri-photovoltaics, which now has opportunities. In fact, they're not able to cope up with the demand for their panels, where farmers can grow local crops underneath the panels, and we have very good R&D data to say that they are working well, and in no way the farmer is going to change his farming practices, but get an additional income through the solar panels. With the new voice for the government of India on this is an opportunity. This is exactly what this group should try to understand. What are those challenges and what are those opportunities which we can help our stakeholders shape them to better markets? I think that if we can do that and set a model in this region, the world is all at yours after that. So I don't know whether I've completed my 10 minutes. I can go on and on. I'm just speaking extempore, but whatever has come with my experience. And I actually look forward to a lot of inputs from all of you as we at AgHub Foundation are trying to build this. One thing, because I know we have some people from education, entrepreneurs are rare, very difficult. The business case developments are competitive. We don't have many student entrepreneurs from the agricultural background. I know Tamil Nadu Agriculture University is doing a lot. We do have a lot of these, but at the end, if you look at numbers, and if I have to put startup and innovation practices into the database, which we were talking in the morning, we don't have that much data sets. So there is a problem. I don't have a unicorn coming out from any of these businesses. We don't need them. We just don't need all these. We need people who can answer some of the problems at the ground level and then also build up economies in this region. If we can do that, again, I'm repeating it, this region is a vibrant region, an opportunity for all of us to frame certain new level type of projects and then help build this more better economy at all levels, hyperlocal, local, regional, and then global. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalpana. You have brought out what are the challenges which we are facing in the context of not only India, but also in the region as such. And one very pertinent point which has emerged is about the startups, because startup ecosystem is something which is really growing in India, and we can see that how our neighboring countries, what we can learn from them, they must be having an equally vibrant startup system, I suppose. But this is something which is important to leverage the synergies between our countries for the startups. Now I would like to hear from our guest from Nepal, and I invite Professor Gauchan. I'll briefly introduce you, Dr. Biswas Gauchan. He is Executive Director of Institute for Integrated Development Studies, Nepal. He served in UNDP both in Nepal and Africa for 10 years in different capacities and went on to become a chief executive officer of a commercial bank in South Sudan, where he served for 2 years. He's founder chairman of Shangri-La Development Bank and co-founder of Quest International College and Omega International School. So he brings in a very different perspective. He has a lot of background of finance also. So he writes extensively on economic policy and geostrategic issues relating to Nepal and South Asia. He's fellow chartered accountant and holds a PhD degree in economics. So a great combination of a financial expert and an economist. Dr. Gauchan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My fellow speakers on the dais, Dr. Rashid, Ifri, and Dr. Suresh Babu, all the way from Washington, and all the distinguished guests and participants. Just a couple of months back, we signed an MOU with RIS for a greater collaboration between the two think tanks in these two countries. And we have also been part of this PRCI project where Dr. Babu played an important role in bringing this initiative in Asia. It was essentially meant for Africa with the Fit the Future program, but he was the one who, brought this to this region, and that is why we are here today, participating from different countries in the region in this important conference. Having said that, Nepal faces lots of challenges, especially in agriculture. There was a time back until 2005 or so, we used to enjoy a trade balance with India in agriculture trade. But for the rest of the world, we always had a huge trade deficit. But since then, things have changed. But coincidentally, what happened was some of the Nepal's membership with WTO started in 2004, and the same year, Nepal became the member of BIMSTEC also. And from 2006, SAFTA also became effective. But despite all these, world trade treaties and regional agreements on trade, not much has happened in Nepal in terms of the benefit that we could achieve from this trade. So what has happened? And so because it is important to understand that our context is so unique and so different. So we need to find unique solutions, very organic solutions to our problems. Otherwise, a common narrative, a common ideology or theory of trade probably doesn't apply everywhere in every context. So we need to, rethink, reinvent a very specific, ways of doing things so that the disadvantaged small countries can also benefit from the larger, greater trade integration. And as far as South Asia is concerned, the trade, intra-regional trade is just below 6%. We started in 1985, and then you see this less than 6%. In BIMSTEC, it's little over than 6%. So our trade integration is such a, I would say, a mess. But within this little trade integration, India happens to be the largest beneficiary in terms of the trade surplus that is getting from among these member countries. And when I did my PhD, I did some analysis of intra-regional trade in South Asia, and I was very amazed to find that 3 countries in the region was the largest trade surplus contributing country to India. Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, top 5 trade surplus providing countries for India, apart from USA and UAE. So, I mean, and it was very obvious, very natural, because India, the size, the population, the kind of economic growth that it has achieved for the last 3 decades or so, contiguous, border with many of the countries. So all this contributed to a benefit from inter-regional trade. But because the 3 largest economy in both in BIMSTEC and both in South Asia, their percentages of inter-trade relative to their global trade happens to be too low, whereas the other 3 countries, their intra-region trade relative to their global trade is very high. So what happens is, because of the size of these big 3 countries, the intra-regional trade affected accordingly. So I think our aspiration could be something like that of ASEAN, where it is, I think, the intra-regional trade is almost 1/4 of their global trade. But lots of things to be done to achieve that number. And I think, it's very difficult, but I think that's something that we can aspire. But it has to be for the benefit of all the countries in the region. Otherwise, because of the kind of asymmetry that we have, such asymmetry, you can compare between the size of India versus the Bhutan. It is just amazing, And that kind of, asymmetry, I think you don't find anywhere in other regions. So these are the very practical challenges that we face when we talk about regional integration. And when we started SHARC, there's aspirations of, even the economic union. And that is something, I think, at this stage has become a fallacy. We can never achieve that. At that time, I think we were more guided by European Union kind of structure. That's something that is far-fetched. Even if we can achieve ASEAN, that's quite good enough for us. And Nepal went into lots of challenges lately because of the structure. 1990s is the beginning of the first generation structural reform that we undertook, but because of the conflict and so many other political transitions, so many other factors, our second generation structural reform never happened. So our economy was shaped in the last 3 decades by these factors, and we became an economy which was living beyond its means. So that's why we come across in FY 2022 a major challenges in our external sector, and agriculture happens to be one contributing factor. To the extent that, we had a trade deficit of 36% of GDP. Can you believe that? And we have more than 12% of current account deficit, and balance of payment deficit was more than 5% in a single year. And if that had continued for next 2 years, we could probably have ended like being Sri Lanka, So during that year, FY 2022, lots of parallels were drawn between Nepal and Sri Lanka. Are we going into the path of Sri Lanka? But our case was quite different from that of Sri Lanka. So those are the things that we essentially had to, as a think tank, quell that, the fear among the larger audience in Nepal and even to the policy maker. And agriculture is very important for the entire region, and also especially for Nepal, because I think among all the 7 countries in the region, it happens to be with the largest contributing to our GDP, 24%, somewhat close to Myanmar. So, and also in terms of the population engaged in agriculture, it is the largest. More than 60% of our population are still engaged in agriculture. So it means the importance of agriculture for Nepal. But despite that, farmers and agriculture have never been a critical political constituency in Nepal. That's why it has always been neglected, unlike India and Bangladesh, where I think the first priority for the Prime Minister and for any political parties is to make the farmers happy. And that doesn't happen in Nepal, and because in Nepal, no farmer votes like a farmer. Okay? So that is why the sector is completely overlooked for the past many, many decades. And that's why the productivity, the R&D, the budget allocation in agriculture is very less. And with that kind of resource allocation, it's difficult to achieve agriculture transformations in Nepal. But fortunately, this time, the fiscal policy has designated next decade as a decade of agriculture investment in Nepal. That's a good news for us. But the travesty is that, for this, the very first year of that decade, the budget allocation for agriculture has come down, So that's the irony that we are facing. But that shows a kind of, in terms of statement that the government has made that, yes, agriculture is going to be extremely important. And we played our role as a think tank in the country. And I think we need a lot of these kind of conferences where we can, just push this agenda in the country and also across the region, why agriculture is so important, because so many people, populations are engaged. And one of the major key contributing factor for any poverty alleviations, malnutrition is, I think, essentially the investment that goes into agriculture sector. And we need, just before coming to this conference, I met Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister to, convince him why we need institutions like IFRI. We have been working with IFRI for more than a decade. And now IFRI wants to set up its country office in Nepal, and the first question that Deputy Prime Minister asked me is, why IFRI in Nepal? So lots of convincing needed there. We lack this R&D, research in agriculture, lots of those things. And we are very big on our partnership with institutions like IFRI, which can bring lots of international and cross countries' experiences and that, that part, which is extremely important for a country like Nepal. and Dr. Rashid talked about this trade theory, absolute advantage, comparative advantage, and the new concept of value, chain. And if I distill through these three stages of evolution in trade theory, still value addition also cannot work in Nepal. That's the, because landlocked, sandwiched by two large economies in the world, India becoming the third largest country in the next couple of years, and the logistic cost of Nepal because of the difficult terrain, geography, all these things doesn't allow Nepal to be part of this global value chain on merchandise and even in agriculture. So our case is so important. So we need support from all of you. What we really can do, to address our specific challenges. Otherwise, I said that 40% of the import is as big as 40% of GDP, and we export less than 4%. Can you believe that? That number, 36% of trade deficit, and around 23% of total import is agricultural products. So the challenge is in agriculture. That's something that we need to do. And we need to relook the entire scenario from this perspective and with the context that Nepal is in. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely challenging for us, especially on the external front. So agriculture transformation is the way forward, and how much we can leverage within the region. And we have suggested as a think tank that the government has to take whatever it takes strategy. and in a mission mode for next decade, lots of resources, lots of R&D, lots of those things. What can be done? Do everything to transform our agriculture sector. And if you compare between 2 decades, the first decade of the new century, our agriculture output growth was more than 3%, around 3.2%, but last decade it has declined despite seeing agriculture sector being the largest beneficiary of credit flows because of central bank's policy to allocate 15% of total credit into agriculture sector. So we have already reached 13%. So it means that agriculture has been the largest beneficiary. But despite that, the agriculture output growth has declined in last decade. So we could see lots of this agri-washing. We have heard greenwashing, but in Nepal, you feel that there is agri-washing. What that basically means is that the credit that is taken for agriculture has been siphoned to another sector, and that goes into real estate in Nepal. So these are the challenges that I face. And climate change, of course, and I think the BIMSTEC members, at least 4 or 5, happens the most affected. And it's a huge issue, and I think we need to do something together to address the risks that we face every year, for the last 2 decades, And India also happens to be, in last 2 years, happens to be within top 10 most affected countries due to climate change. And then subsidies, I think that's important because we have an open share border, porous border to India. The subsidy, any agriculture policy of India will have impact on Nepal. Just take an example of wheat and rice ban. The price, that set our price, so high. And so we face this inflation on the food component very much during those times. So, I mean, these are the things that is there on the ground, and then we are facing this all the time. And I think we need to look at that aspects as well. And shocks have become very common days, taking a pandemic, supply chains, conflicts, all these things, and so these are the things that we collaboratively, I think, if we can work on these areas, then probably we can be more resilient, moving from just in time to just in case kind of, safeguard measures that we need to instill in our cooperations. So, but our common challenges are similar, okay? Small farm holding, low productivity, access to credit market, all these things are common, and that's something that I think RIS would be the one to, help us in this regard as to how we can do, and all the research community can. So with these few notes, I would like to end my presentations. And we believe in BIMSTEC because now the shark is in the limbo, and probably can't do much under the SHARP framework. So the logical and the natural thing for us to do is to increase our cooperations within this BIMSTEC framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gochan. We'll take the questions in the end from all the audience. Very well brought out that how we are so regionally integrated that whatever policies which are there in India, that actually affects our neighbors. The sheer size of the country of India and several other countries, that makes a difference to what's happening in Nepal and what's happening in Bhutan. So when we are talking in terms of regional cooperation at the level of BIMSTEC, it's very essential that the policies, especially the export promotion policies or the bans, whatever we are taking, we also take into account how it is not only going to affect our food security considerations, but also the food security and issues in the neighboring countries. So this is a very valid point, especially countries like Nepal, which are very heavily import dependent. Also the point on the value chain which you brought out, that you have challenges because of the landlocked country, the value chain development is an issue there. that is where again maybe we can bring in the points which Madam Kalpana had brought in, that how we can leverage this agri-startup ecosystem to see that what kind of value addition can take place even with this limited scope in agriculture sector. Now, I would invite our third speaker, Dr. Devesh Roy, Senior Research Fellow in IFPRI. Dr. Devesh Roy, he is IFPRI's Development Strategies and Governance. He's working in Development Strategies and Governance Unit based in the South Asia office in New Delhi. He has conducted research on issues relating to food safety, agri-food trade, food security in South Asian countries, and contract farming in high-value agriculture in India. He holds a PhD in economics from University of Maryland at College Park and master's degree from Delhi School of Economics, India. His areas of expertise include international trade, environment, firm and farm linkages, and food safety. Dr. Devesh Roy. Yeah, the presentation, somebody please help out for loading the presentation.
Just move out, and this is yours.
So this is just going to next. Okay. All right. So thank you for inviting me. This is, I've always go to this meeting when before Dr. Shahid, our director, was Dr. Joshi. So I used to play the role of poor man's Dr. Joshi all the time. So I'm now playing the role of poor man's Dr. Shahid. We talk about this thing whenever this topic was there, so I wanted to say what is the issue that you can think about as related to agriculture in BIMSTEC. I mean, the usual things that you're going to ask is about agriculture is so important, it's a big employer, there's some structural transformation but still not good enough, and so on. So this really took me back to my school days in Delhi school, and I remember with Professor Suresh Tendulkar, I used to deliberately take the bus and then get off at a stop, and then we used to walk to Delhi school, and those were my walks of wisdom, okay? And he really taught us economic development in India, and so some of the things that he really talked about, and I was just recalling, and so this whole idea is about this, the Middle's idea of this Asian drama, right? That, and if you think about the Asian drama, this was most about, at the time, I mean, though he did not mention it as, but, if you look at that book, the whole issue that was mainly focused on India, but there are also lot of Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. So, but, if you think about agriculture and when you think about the Asian drama idea that was there, you can think about, it has always been labeled by people, the analysts, as, the whole text in Asian drama is of a cheerful optimist, okay? And that's what you can think about what is going to be, I mean, at least that's our take, and that's what we think about in agriculture here, and we can be cheerful pessimist. And so I'm basically, I wanted to say that, I'm not a cheerful pessimist on this agriculture. What we think about it at BIMSTEC is not so cheerful optimist, okay? And that's what the Asian drama is there when it comes to think about agriculture in BIMSTEC countries. So there's a book that, Professor Deepak Nair edited, which is after 50 years after Middle's book, which was 1968. So it is more than 50 years now. That was in 2018. So they were also looking at that chapter there, which, one of our directors in IFPRI, Rob Voss, he has a chapter there on an agriculture as part of the Asian drama. So one of the things, and when I talked about that, that walk of wisdom that we used to have with, Professor Suresh Tendulkar, when he used to go, and always used to say about, from the middle's point of view, that, he really doesn't really value markets as much. He doesn't understand the power of market, how much it will transform Asia. And remember the first class we used to have in our Delhi school when Professor Tendulkar used to draw a line, and he used to go and say, I'm on the left side before when I started, and I have come all the way to the right side, right? And he says that because I know that, what markets can do. And so that is the idea that, and so if you want to ask about what is going to be the state of agriculture in the BIMSTEC region and what's going to be the way forward, and I think that, including in our own country, which is India, and if somebody asks me a question, what is that really plagues Indian agriculture, I would say it's markets, right? And one of the big mistakes that we make all the time is when we think about trade, we always think about international trade. And trade is pretty general equilibrium, so you can look at all kinds of linkages, domestic trade, regional trade, global trade, and all this have to be done as a composite, right? And so that is the idea. So one of the things that, within the BIMSTEC region, and that's why I brought in the Asian drama, is that Asian drama is basically that if you read that book, I think one of the things that plagued that thing is about homogenizing. And that's in BIMSTEC is really heterogeneous. I mean, all the speakers that we had, you have the case of Nepal, you have the case of Bhutan, and with India, it will also be so many countries, Bihar, where I come from, it has more than the population of Mexico, right? And UP has more than the population of Brazil, right? So you're thinking about many countries here, so you cannot be homogenizing. That's the idea. So one of the two things that you really think about the BIMSTEC agriculture, and two of the things that you can really take from Middle's idea actually is that one is this cumulative causation. That is, cumulative causation, it is the theory of development. It requires these institutional and political factors. Those are, it's not only demand and supply, the usual, microeconomics 101 that you look at and determines the outcomes. It's basically a lot of political institutional factors, and there is no other place for it than agriculture. That if you look at the way agriculture you talked about the example of, when India does the National Food Security Act, it not only affects India, it affects the whole region. So we have been doing within the BIMSTEC a lot of work on formal and informal trade. What is happening, you can see how much of the rice gets there. So if you look at the offtake that India has for wheat in West Bengal, and what really you see what it happens to wheat in Bangladesh, right? And where I come from now, Bihar is now self-sufficient in rice. So a lot of rice actually then goes away to Nepal, right? So there's a lot of those institutional factors that you have to take into account. This is the story of agriculture that you have to say the political institutional factors are the main bread here, right? So now there's other thing which is basically my own favorite paper from the graduate school, right? And that is this O-ring theory of development which Michael Kramer wrote. When the Challenger shuttle crashed, it did not crash because of any high-tech failure, right? It was this nut bolts, which are called O-rings, which expanded on heating, and then the shuttle fell apart. So the process of development in agriculture, even for our region, is I think there is a lot of O-rings involved there, right? So you have to think about, a lot of things have to get together, and you talked about the issues related to startups and why that is being lagging. I think there's a lot of O-ring there. A lot of those things, there are the small things that need to be there, which actually can really make these things work, right? And I always see that, there are these O-rings when it comes to agriculture in this. So what has happened is now agriculture, historically, and we have always thought about agriculture as, we were always taught that, APY is what gives you area production yield, if you understand. That is what your agriculture is, right? But agriculture is, in 1960s, 1970s, 40 to 50% of the total value was generated on farm. Now, if you go to US, less than 15% of the value is generated on farm. It's totally off farm, on the value chain. So when you think about agriculture transformation, you have to think about agriculture value chain transformation. And this is what, when you think about agriculture in BIMSTEC, you have to think about what is happening to AVC, which is the agriculture value chain. And that's what the whole transformation on the way ahead. And what, in India, if you look at the growth in agriculture, we have been taught about the Hindu rate of growth in economics, but agriculture has been the most Hindu in terms of its rate of growth, right? I mean, so from that perspective, now if you look at it, all the time, the agriculture value chain, the food enterprises, they have been growing much faster than any time that agriculture has been growing. And they would be the driver of growth. They would be the driver of employment. They would be the driver of livelihoods. So that's what you have to think about in the BIMSTEC region. And so what is going to, now, this, it's Arthur Lewis' picture. That's where we have economists have started off with agriculture as, as contributing to structural transformation, what role it plays. So the whole idea is that, if you think about it, is that, you have a productive sector which is not agriculture, and then a productive sector which is non-agriculture. So you have to labor moving from non-agriculture from agriculture to non-agriculture, and that brings you growth, and that brings you, so that is the idea that is, I really can think about as, in some way, many years down the line, this is actually a bit of agriculture pessimism in that sense. That is the role that it, now if you look at India's structural transformation and also Nepal's structural transformation, you have probably missed the manufacturing bus. So everything is going from, I mean, when I go to Nepal, I see, oh, this is exactly India. Everything is services, right? So I don't see that many chimneys, right? And I traveled through this biggest state in India, like Rajasthan, and I just made it a point. I wanted to count the number of chimneys that I'm going to see, right? And they were very few. And then you compare to when you travel through Thailand, right? And you see the number of chimneys that if you travel like 50, 100 kilometers, and that's what tells you about the role of, and most of those chimneys were related to food processing in Thailand. And that's what, that's what the story that you have to think about in BIMSTEC countries about. So that's one of the presentations where you look at in the afternoon when I will make the presentation. If you want to see what is happening on those processed, semi-processed, unprocessed stuff in context of agriculture transformation in relation to trade in this. And so, some bit of, the kind of balm has come from, IFPRI researchers in terms of not so much of agriculture pessimism that you're going to see. So I think Shahid would remember Johnson and Meller, right? That paper. So this is one of those papers that, you're going to see that, where you'll see a lot more optimism. And I think because of the agriculture value chain transformation, and we have been insisting in our work related to BIMSTEC at IFPRI on trade, that this is not kosher to look at agriculture trade as something different from the way that manufacturing or services trade takes place. So remember when all of we do macroeconomics, we were like we are told agriculture is that sector which produces homogeneous good, and here are all this manufacturing with product differentiation and value addition and so on. But agriculture, if it has to grow, if it has to really become the power that for growth and development, then, and that is what is happening. You have, and you, Dr. Kaushan, you said that Nepal is not participating in agriculture value chain, globalized value chains. I would think that, basically that even if you are landlocked, you have all this topography. If anything, agriculture, globalized value chains would actually help that. And so the idea is that you take the case of, what the kind of good coffee that Nepal produces. What is there in Vietnam that, it becomes such a powerhouse in coffee, and Nepal having such a good start it actually fell back. And you think that because they did not integrate into the AGVC as much as it needed to. So those are the, then you come to that, I'll just conclude in a little bit, but this, if you look at this, I put in one photo of one Nobel laureate, which was Arthur Lewis. The other one, this is Schultz's paper, which is before the CGIS center where we work on. It was before CIMMYT was established and ERI were established, and this book came just before that. And he actually said that, agriculture was not becoming the engine of growth because it was not optimizing on technology. So once you really, and this is something which, and when we say technology, and that is why when we're talking about agriculture value chains, now you see how technology is playing a role there through digitization, through app-based systems. And, we were working on farmer organizations, and then there are systems that they are doing a dial-a-bhaji. And those are the things that, you put in an app, and then you order vegetables, and then and those are the kind of innovations, the technology that are going to drive the agri-food system in the BIMSTEC region. And this is so what is going to be the sources of growth going forward for agriculture? And when I say agriculture, I mean it as, in the broadest term, so you can look at all agriculture value chain, they will be the drivers of growth. So I'll skip this now. So this is, I'll just conclude with that now. So we said that, one of the problems in Middle's idea was that he was really homogenizing. And if you look at the case of agriculture in BIMSTEC countries, it's a poster boy case of what heterogeneity does, right? But there are some similarities, but then some idiosyncratic factors that you have to take into account when you look at the way forward for BIMSTEC agriculture. Now, one of the things that, because this conference is going to focus a lot on trade, now, one of the cardinal mistakes that one could avoid when you look at this is thinking of trade as one separate entity of international trade, domestic trade, and this actually gives me sleepless nights when people start talking like that, right? So because the idea is that, you as a seller, you have a choice of selling domestically or outside. As a buyer, you can buy from domestically, you can buy from region, you can buy from so it's the whole matrix of trade costs and whole possible trading relationship that will, and this kind of thinking, and that is what is going to be the precursor to your GVC. And that is the line of thinking that you need for, the BIMSTEC agriculture or whatever it is to hit the next frontier. So that is what we want to really, so what we have done in IFPRI research on agri-food trade, we really want to bring in that kind of thinking. And, same way when you look at those things, the trade costs are not only tariffs and non-tariff barriers that you're going to face at the border. It's all the domestic costs that, so I don't know whether Shahid, because I got late because it was the traffic. But the point is that, if you look at how the costs of trade that you need to look at is most of it are domestic, right? So how much time, so if you go to a Mumbai port, it takes you 18 days to clear it, right? And you are dealing with trade, and the huge amount of literature will tell you the most important barrier to trade in agriculture is time to trade, right? So, and the BIMSTEC has 1.5 times greater time to trade than ASEAN countries even, right? So these are the areas in which you need to really focus on. And so this is, I think I'll skip, and so these are the whole issue that we want to bring in when going forward. And people talked about environment. We have been working very recently on water. And in BIMSTEC, in environment, climate change, one of the biggest issues that will be water. You can see the areas of water scarcity and where BIMSTEC is all red, right? So that's something that, there's the other thing that we really, and the alternative views that, we'll just conclude with that. In India, we have been talking a lot about that we don't want to do ethanol, we want to do, alternative uses and biofuels and all. So even if you filling in the one SUV tank will take you 240 kgs of maize, right? So you know the trade-off that you're going to face, and these are the issues that going forward that I think there are other stuff that we could do, but I just wanted to flag these points in relation to agri, and I say agri-food situation in BIMSTEC countries and what's the way forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devesh. You have brought back memories of my own days in D school, where we used to have such enlightening discussions in class of Professor Tendulkar and others. Yes, exactly. In the Lewis model framework, there is so much obsession about the non-agriculture sector. But now agriculture sector is looking into not only the food needs, but it is also looking into all the other needs. Fiber is there, fuel, of course, it's a matter of controversy, but fuel. And in fact, the concept of bioeconomy is emerging so sharply that probably even pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, so many other things are coming from the agriculture sector. So where we have to re-look into whether agriculture sector can, we really need to shift so much labor force away from the agriculture sector, and agriculture sector cannot be a source of growth. All those models have to be revisited in the current context. Thank you very much for this, very pertinent points. We'll take questions from the audience later. Now I would invite Dr. Manoj, Senior Research Fellow, Institute of Policy Studies from Sri Lanka. Dr. Manoj is a research fellow at the Institute of Political Studies of Sri Lanka, with the research interests in agriculture, agribusiness value chains, food security, climate change, environment, and natural resource economics. He has extensively worked with several international organizations like WFP, FAO, IFAD, ACIR, IFPRI, Zika, USAID, and you name an N number of them. He holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture and a master's degree in agricultural economics and a PhD from University of West Australia. Please bring in some valuable experiences from Sri Lanka.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, my presentation is a little bit different to what others did because I'm broadly focusing on how the agricultural status changed in the region, and also the challenges the region is facing, and what scope available for regional cooperation to address those challenges. So basically, first I would like to thank RIS and IFPRI for giving me this chance. Actually, we have been working with RIS for and IFPRI with this PRCI program for last 4 years when RIS was working on BIMSTEC issues. We have been working on the issues related to Sri Lanka, like starting from the impact of COVID-19 on the agriculture sector, then Ukraine crisis on agriculture, then chemical fertilizer ban in Sri Lanka, where we had a lot of issues related to agriculture in the country, and then climate change that we are working currently. So here I'm basically focusing on introducing the BIMSTEC agriculture situation, and then the objective of this presentation and status of agriculture in the region, and agriculture challenges, and finally the way forward, focusing on how regional cooperation under BIMSTEC could utilize to address the challenges that I'm going to mention. So BIMSTEC region is characterized by diverse agroclimatic conditions. Even within the countries, we have different agroclimatic conditions, making it suitable for various agriculture activities. So a lot of different type of agriculture activities are happening in the region in different countries. Some are common to some countries, like rice production is basically main agricultural production in most of the countries, including India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even in Thailand. So agriculture is integral to the economics and livelihood of its member countries. Basically, even though the contribution of agriculture to GDP has reduced over the years, still a significant proportion of people are employed in agriculture. In the case of Sri Lanka, it's about 26% of the population, and this is actually different in the rural areas where agriculture is dominant. This goes more than 50%. So agriculture, role of agriculture in rural income generation and ensuring food security and giving export income cannot be undermined. So it's very important for all the economies in the BIMSTEC region. But the sector, agriculture in the sector face various challenges. Some are specific to the countries and some are common, like climate change, as earlier speakers also mentioned, and water management issues, technological advancement issues with the technology, and market access issues, and unsustainable traditional practices of agriculture. Some of these are very common to the region. And so that's why a region could benefit from the collaborative efforts to address these challenges and leverage opportunities available in globally. So agriculture is one of the major area in the BIMSTEC agreement, as earlier also mentioned BIMSTEC Secretary. Since 2005, it was included as a standalone sector, and several expert group meetings has been happened over the years. So some cooperation related to BIMSTEC agriculture has been happened, but still there are certain areas that we have to focus on. So objective of my presentation is to discuss the current status, challenges, and agriculture in the region, and find out the areas of regional collaboration in terms of agricultural advancement. So here you can see, so I'm basically using some of the data from FAO Stat, World Development Indicators, and USDA data to show the agricultural production status and the challenges the sector facing. As you see here, gross production index for agriculture has been increasing over the years, but a lot of fluctuation and a lot of variation in different countries, especially Bhutan, the agricultural production index has been changing a lot, and even in Myanmar and also in Sri Lanka, especially in the recent time with the COVID-19 and other issues, economic crisis and all. So gross production index for agriculture has been changing, but overall it's in an increasing trend. The next graph, you can see gross per capita production index. It's increasing gradually, but in recent time you can see it's kind of a lot of fluctuation and stagnation in most of the countries. What this shows is with the growth in population, it's about 1% on average in the BIMSTEC region. So agriculture production index has to increase more. We have to focus on agriculture production to meet the demand, increasing demand for food in the region. Here, when we disaggregated it, production growth is mainly due to the growth in the cereal sector, and we can see some of the growth in recent time in fruit and vegetables sector as well. So because of the demand changes and people are moving for increased consumption of fruits and vegetables. But in countries like Sri Lanka, we are not consuming the WHO recommended level of fruit and vegetables. Agricultural land use. You can see in almost all the countries, agricultural land use is constant. And also in the second graph, you can see that per capita availability of arable land, it's declining except for Sri Lanka, where it's almost stagnant. So this shows that there are not enough land for agriculture. So what we have to focus more on agriculture productivity improvement to meet the demand from the increasing population. Here you can see the agriculture labor force participation. It has been reduced as it's normal with the structural transformation. Agriculture GDP is reducing, but here what you see is as the data that I showed earlier on agriculture GDP, agriculture labor force has not reduced on par with the agricultural GDP. For example, in the case of Sri Lanka, 26% of the population is involved in agriculture to produce about 8% of the agriculture GDP. So in most of the countries, the situation is similar. There's a significant variation in country level of the labor force participation. In Sri Lanka, it's the lowest participation, and it's I think highest in Nepal with 61% about. This is 2022 data from FAO. So here you see with the liberalization in 1980s in most of the countries, the contribution of agriculture has reduced over the years, as I earlier mentioned. But the thing is, when the structural change happened, most of these economies transferred from agriculture to services without robust growth in the industrial sector, as the countries in the East Asia, Southeast Asian countries, most of the countries in the South Asia and Thailand, it's kind of in between. Without robust growth in the industrial sector, the agriculture sector transformation to the service sector, we experienced the issues of this during the COVID-19 period, that in the case of Sri Lanka, that the economy was affected a lot. Here, you can see the agriculture total productivity. It has been increasing, but it has been constant in recent time. That you can see when we disaggregated it to the different input component, irrigation has been increased, the investment in irrigation and all, but it has been kind of constant over the years. And agriculture R&D, it's very low in the region, except for Thailand. Thailand has about 1%, but in all the other countries, it's very minimal, and also it's stagnating. Irrigation, even though in absolute term, irrigation investment has increased, in real term, it's kind of decreasing even when compared with the GDP and all. And also, we are not considering the investment in irrigation, what areas that we are focusing on. Mainly in Sri Lanka, it's not focusing on improving the efficiency of irrigation and also introducing smart irrigation practices and all. But traditionally, it has been focused on maintaining operation and maintenance of irrigation systems. So these things has to be changed. Here, I just compared economic complexity of the region. As you see here, its ability to produce complex products requiring sophisticated technical know-how. But in most of the countries in BIMSTEC regions, they are producing like primary products without using the sophisticated technical know-how, except for Thailand, which you can see its high economic complexity index, and also it's in an increasing trend. All the other South Asian countries are below that level when we compare with Southeast Asian countries. So just a snapshot of the agriculture, what we already talked about. So there are different crops. Some are similar in the region and some are different. And the region are famous for some of the world leading production. Is, for example, India is #1 rice exporter, and Thailand, even Myanmar and Bangladesh are also leading exporters of rice, and Bangladesh is leading in jute exports. India also has a significant share of world export of wheat, and Sri Lanka in tea, it's third highest exporter. So the sector has some commonalities as well as differences that we can utilize in agricultural development. But there are challenges. Some are, as I earlier mentioned, some are common and some are specific to the countries. Most are common, like technological lack of technological advancement, climate change, inefficient irrigation use, and all things like that. So we can utilize the regional integration under BIMSTEC for addressing most of these challenges. Some of the regional cooperation, some of the initiatives and in different sectors that we can focus on, I'm just mentioning here. One is research and development. I think earlier speaker also already talked about R&D is very low in the region. We can kind of do joint research on high yield, climate resilient, pest resistant crop varieties. There are a lot of similarities in this region. And also sustainable agricultural practices, also sharing of agricultural technologies, mechanization techniques, and best practices in precision farming. So technology, sharing technology is very difficult because of the intellectual property rights and all with the countries, other developed countries. But we can utilize this regional cooperation to share the technology within the countries which are similar, and also developing regional agriculture databases and joint research, establishing regional network of technology transfer officers of major research organizations. For example, in Europe, they have that the European Technology Transfer Office Circle, which a combination of about 30 odd research organization in the region, which they use to do kind of technology transfer, joint research, and things like that. And then in terms of food security also, there are certain measures that I have mentioned here, like establishing regional food research, but we have to think that there are already certain initiatives under SARC, Food Bank, ECOWAS regional food security, that is the African one. So what we have to think is there are in trade we said that noodle ball effect when you have a lot of regional agreement which have overlapping mandates, and also we have, when we are kind of going forward with this initiative, we have to think about this as well. And trade and market access, I'm not going to talk in details because we have a separate session on trade. So basically harmonizing standards and regulations and things like that. Resource management here mainly is not related to Sri Lanka because it's a island country. So basically for the countries with borders. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Manoj, for a very informative lecture. I suppose this should have been the first presentation where all the points were brought in, all the statistics was brought in. Thank you very much for this. And now I invite Professor Mohanty, and since you are the host, the onus of being the shortest lies on you. So Professor Mohanty, let me briefly introduce Professor Mohanty, although he doesn't need any introduction to this August gathering. Professor S.K. Mohanty is working in research and information system. His research interests include international trade issues, regional trading arrangements, WTO issues, and a whole list. And he has played a very important role in working on areas related to regional groupings like SARC, BIMSTEC, BRICS, IPSA, COMESA, EU, SEO, and so many others. So I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In fact, I will take very less time to make presentation, and my focus would be on the BIMSTEC as a whole. I will have a different narrative, what I have seen from different countries, that BIMSTEC is definitely a very growing economy all through the last 2 decades, between more than 7% during the period of buoyancy. And even during recession, it went up to 6 to 7% growth in total. Primarily because most of the countries adopted export-led growth at the beginning, And they also try to replace it with the domestic demand-led growth at a later stage. But in all the places, the focus has been on trade. And therefore, the country could grow, the region could grow very fast. Definitely, by standard of ASEAN and other neighbors, international trade is very poor, slightly more than 6% in the BIMSTEC region. But because of various reasons, I think the number can be contested. But the fact is that the signs that we get from the region is that there is a tremendous potential for GVC trade within the region. Why I say that the region is one of the fastest growing region in the world, that all countries and regions are growing, but some countries, if are growing much faster than others, then the share would grow up. That you can see consistently the share of GDP share of the region with respect to gross world product is growing over the years. And that we can see from the high growth. The blue dots, one can see that is more than 6% growth. And from 2004 and up to 2021, that it's all packed with the blue dots, showing that its growth is much more than 6%. The same kind of replication we find in trade. Trade has been growing very fast within the region with respect to the total world trade. And that share was very stiff between 2003 to 10, and then, but it started growing over years. But after a setback during COVID-19, it is stiff growth in the trade share in the world trade. So that we can see that the region's trade in the agriculture may be very small in size, but having constantly growing both in terms of exports and imports, and the trade gap is in favor of the region. So if we look at the structure of the trade composition, particularly by HS chapters, sections, then exports and imports are pretty good in areas other than that of fats and oil in exports, but live animals and others in terms of imports. Going to the composition of trade of different countries and the structure of different countries within the region, I think India, Thailand, and Bangladesh are the three countries which are really taking the lion's share of the region's trade. And another interesting part is that you can find intra-industry trade in many segments in large economies like India, Thailand. And also you can see that kind of situation in Sri Lanka where fruits and vegetable country imports and exports from the rest of the world. Now, where is the growth center? Why international trade is low, and where we have got more strength within the region? If we segregate international trade between the different sectors, you can very well see that agriculture international trade is much above than that of international trade in the manufacturing and also in the minerals. And therefore, the strength of the region lies with agriculture. But agriculture is a highly protected sector in the country, in the region. You can't just blanketly open them up. You should be more specific. So if we be more specific about international trade within agriculture, then you find that processed food and fruits and vegetables are the two sectors where international trade is very high as compared to normal agriculture international trade within the region. Now, one can see the kind of liberalization that we have been taking in the region. We have taken both simple average tariff and also import-weighted tariff over the years by different sectors. If you look at the overall trade tariff liberalization segment, you can very well see that the simple average tariff, which is very close to that of trade policy, has been much higher than the import-weighted tariff, which is very close to that of the collection rates. So if that is the case, you can see that kind of tendency in most of the segments, particularly in minerals and manufacturing, but not in agriculture. That means in those sectors where we got heavily traded items, the tariff rates are quite high. And that's why the import rates are much higher than that of the simple average tariff. Or if we look at the different chapters, I think some chapters are more protected than others. Like fish and live plants are with very low level of protection. But on the other hand, most of the processed food sectors are highly tariffed. And therefore, there is a space for trade liberalization if you want to really promote global regional value chain within BIMSTEC region. Of course, I did some classification in 2007 with the UNESCAP, and before that, Atukural and others did it. On the basis of that, we try to classify products into processed and semi-processed products. The crux is that the level of trade in both processed and non-processed trade is more or less similar. But you have got a huge trade margin, trade surplus in the processed food sectors as compared to non-processed sectors. It clearly indicates that there is huge profit if we go for processed food. Recently, we have again reclassified agricultural products into 12 segments. And here you can very well see that in some product segments, the regional trade is much higher with the world economy, and some are less. Some of the bigger ones could be fish, meat, and edible products. Again, going to processed and non-processed thing, I think we can very well see that non-processed food segment is quite dominating in both exports and imports of the region. Going the disaggregated trade profile of the BIMSTEC regions, one can very well see across countries, fish export is pretty high in most of the countries, and others are going below than that. Sectoral interregional trade pattern is quite interesting, quite slightly different from regions trade with the rest of the world. Here we can see in three major products, edible cereals, fish, and sugar are the three major areas where interregional trade is very high, both in terms of exports and imports from within the region. So there is ample of space for developing regional value chain in agriculture in diverse sectors at the product level. That we can see that most of the regional economies are more with the upstream segment of the production fragmentation within the region. And if things would improve over the years, perhaps production, there could be some countries which will be specialized in some trade hubs. So now we are in the phase of transforming the regional economy. The first phase of unbundling is now over, and we are passing on to the second phase of unbundling, where there will be more trade in the intermediate segment of trade. So we have developed a new model for regional value chain based on the specific products, homogeneous product groups, and also in product groups, we have identified three different segments of the smile curve. I think in the last session we will be presenting. So I end up this presentation saying that there's a huge space for trade in agriculture to grow, but that requires huge investment in the region. Perhaps the SEPA, which would come very soon, would give some space to promote value chain within the region. And agriculture trade is rising within the region with respect to world, and also within the region that can really take the lead within the region. Interregional trade in agriculture is very high. That is the low-hanging fruit. I think we should focus on this. processed food sector is one where we have got a long-term interest within the region, and we have got a huge trade surplus within the region. I hope within the comprehensive cooperation can be there when we have got a very strong FTA policy for the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty. The common point which has kind of emerged from all the speakers is that value addition and markets, these are the two drivers which are going to be very important for enhancing the agriculture cooperation in the region. We'll quickly take a few questions from the audience. Please introduce yourself and be very brief with your question, and please let us know to whom the question is directed. And we'd like to keep it as short as possible because I can see Suresh Babu, Dr. Suresh Babu is looking at me that his session is running late. So very quick questions from the audience. Anyone from the audience? Yes, please. Please briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shireen. I was an entrepreneur. So thank you for the insights you shared with us. But the question is quite depressing data about agriculture and all the things. So my question is like, when we go for this agricultural crops, they're really, like production is low and they take longer period to grow, low and slow. So, I mean, is it feasible to go with them to meeting climate change things and agricultural practices, meeting sustainable agricultural practices? So is it feasible? And the second thing is about Nepal. So your geography is quite like for those crops, kind of organic crops. So are you doing something in that? And
your question is directed towards Nepal. And the first question, whom would you like to take?
Anyone and everyone,
okay, I will
please.
ask Dr. Kalpana Shastri to take your first question.
Thank you.
If I were to understand